The sizzle of grease filled the air as Mark flipped another burger, the spatula scraping against the grill. His back ached from standing for hours, and the heat from the kitchen clung to his skin like an unwanted second layer. It was another long shift at the roadside diner, another evening spent sweating under fluorescent lights while the world outside moved on without him. He glanced at the clock, still 3 hours to go. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple. It was the kind of view that tourists loved, the kind they'd stop to take pictures of before hopping back in their cars to continue their road trips. For Mark, it was just another reminder of how small his world had always been. This diner, this town, this unshakable feeling of being stuck. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he already knew what it was before checking. The family group chat. Mom, Logan just landed in Paris. Can you believe it? Dad, our little explorer. Aunt Linda, what a wonderful experience for him. Mark's fingers hovered over the screen, then locked it without replying. Of course, Logan was in Paris. Why wouldn't he be? Their parents had always treated his younger brother like some rare, delicate flower, showering him with expensive clothes, private tutors, and summer getaways in places Mark only saw in magazines. Meanwhile, Mark was expected to be responsible, to be independent, to figure things out on his own. It had always been that way. When Logan needed a new car at 16, their dad handed him the keys to a sleek, silver sedan without hesitation. When Mark had needed one at the same age, save up for it, his father had said. So Mark had worked. First, odd jobs around the neighborhood, then part-time shifts at the diner after school. It had taken 2 years, but he'd finally bought a beat-up old truck that guzzled gas and broke down every other month. And yet, despite all the sacrifices, all the nights spent grinding while Logan lived effortlessly, their parents had never once acknowledged the difference. If anything, they justified it. Logan had potential, they always said. He was meant for greater things. Mark? He was practical, steady, the one they could rely on to take care of himself. The bell above the diner door jingled, breaking Mark from his thoughts. He turned to see a group of teens from his high school filing in, their laughter ringing out across the restaurant. One of them, Jason Reynolds, spotted Mark behind the counter and smirked. Damn, still working here, huh? Mark forced a tight smile. Yep. Jason nudged his friend. Man, Logan's living it up in Europe, and you're flipping burgers. That's rough. The heat in Mark's chest had nothing to do with the grill. He wanted to say something, anything, but what was the point? They weren't wrong. The rest of his shift dragged on, his mind bouncing between frustration and exhaustion. When he finally clocked out, it was close to midnight. The parking lot was empty except for his truck, the headlights casting long shadows as he pulled out onto the quiet road home. His house was dark when he arrived, but he knew his parents were still awake. Sure enough, he found them in the living room, their laptop open on the coffee table, pictures from Logan's trip flashing across the screen. Mark dropped his bag by the door. Logan made it safe, I guess. His mother barely looked up. Of course. He's having the time of his life. His father nodded. He deserves it. Mark exhaled through his nose. I just don't get it. That got their attention. His mother frowned. Get what? This. He gestured around. Logan gets to fly across the world while I work double shifts just to afford gas. You guys never even question it. His father's expression hardened. You're different. Mark crossed his arms. How? Because I don't expect handouts. His mother sighed, rubbing her temples. Logan has more potential, Mark. He needs our support. You're strong. You've always been strong. You'll figure things out. A bitter laugh slipped past Mark's lips. Right? So, because I can take care of myself, that means I don't deserve the same chances. It's not about fairness, his father said, irritation creeping into his voice. It's about making sure the family succeeds. Mark stared at them, realization settling deep in his gut. That was it, wasn't it? Logan was the one they saw as worth investing in. Mark was just the support system, the one who was supposed to keep things running so Logan never had to struggle. And they didn't even see anything wrong with that. Without another word, Mark turned and walked upstairs to his room. He shut the door, but the anger still buzzed inside him, sharp and unrelenting. Lying on his bed, he stared at the ceiling, trying to push the resentment down, but for the first time, he didn't want to. Because maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop being the overlooked son. Mark pushed himself through college the same way he had pushed himself through everything else in life, without a safety net, without help, and without excuses. His days blurred together in a constant cycle of work, study, and exhaustion. Mornings started early, with coffee that never quite seemed strong enough, followed by back-to-back classes where he barely kept his eyes open. Evenings were spent working, bartending, stocking shelves at a warehouse, sometimes even taking overnight shifts at a gas station just to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Logan drifted through life like it was a vacation. Their parents paid for his tuition, his apartment, and his car. He didn't have to juggle 3 jobs or stress about whether he could afford groceries. Instead, he spent his weekends partying, posting pictures of yacht trips and VIP club access. While Mark stretched every dollar until it bled, Logan never even glanced at a price tag. The favoritism wasn't subtle, it was a slap in the face, over and over again. By the time Mark graduated, he had something more valuable than a degree. He had grit. He had learned how to survive, how to navigate a world that offered him nothing and expected everything in return. But he also had a choice. The easy route would have been to settle, to take a safe job with a steady paycheck, to accept that no matter how hard he worked, his parents would always see Logan as the golden child. But Mark was done playing the part they had assigned him. He wasn't going to be the responsible son who existed only to clean up Logan's messes. So he took a risk. With every penny of his hard-earned savings, he bought a small, run-down garage on the edge of town. The sign outside was faded, the walls stained with years of neglect, but he saw something there, potential. The first year was brutal. Mark worked longer hours than he ever had before, pulling 16-hour days to keep the business afloat. Some nights, he slept in the office because he couldn't afford the gas to drive home. The money trickled in slowly, just enough to cover rent and supplies, but never enough to breathe easy. But he kept going. By year 5, the shop had grown into something real. He had a steady stream of customers, a team of employees, and for the first time in his life, a future that was truly his. The struggle had been worth it. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building something. And then, the conversation started. Whenever he mentioned the idea of buying a house, his parents would change the subject, steering it back to Logan. They would sigh about how Logan was struggling, how the job market was so unfair to someone with his talents. The first time it happened, Mark brushed it off. The second time, it was harder to ignore. Then came the not-so-subtle hints. You know, Logan could really use some stability, his mother said one evening over dinner. Mark chewed his food slowly. Yeah? He could get a job. His father frowned. Come on, Mark. You know how hard things have been for him. Mark raised an eyebrow. Hard? He said every opportunity handed to him. That's not fair, his mother said, shaking her head. Logan just needs a little help to get back on his feet. Mark exhaled through his nose. And by help, you mean? His parents exchanged a glance before his father cleared his throat. Well, you're doing well for yourself. Maybe, if you bought a house, you could let Logan stay there for a while. Just until he gets settled. Mark stared at them. You want me to buy a house for Logan? His mother had the nerve to look offended. Not for Logan. For the family. We take care of each other. A bitter laugh bubbled up in Mark's chest, but he swallowed it down. Of course. Family. The same excuse they had always used to justify their favoritism. The same reasoning they had given when they expected him to sacrifice while Logan coasted. His father leaned forward, speaking in that reasonable, patronizing tone that made Mark's skin crawl. You have to understand, Mark. You're in a position to help. Logan just needs a little boost. Mark clenched his jaw. And when exactly does Logan take responsibility for himself? His mother waved a hand dismissively. It's not about responsibility. It's about doing what's right. Right. Right was Logan living off their parents while Mark worked himself into the ground. Right was expecting him to fund his brother's life just because he had worked hard enough to make something of himself. The worst part was that they weren't even asking, they were assuming. In their minds, this was already decided. Mark pushed his chair back and stood up. I think we're done here. His mother frowned. Mark, don't be selfish. He turned to look at her, something cold settling in his chest. Selfish? He shook his head, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. You want me to work my entire life just so Logan never has to struggle? That's not family. That's exploitation. His father's expression darkened. We've done everything for you. Mark met his gaze without flinching. No, you did everything for Logan. I just had to figure it out. For once, they didn't have a response. Mark grabbed his keys and walked out the door, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. By the time he got in his car, something in him had already shifted. He had spent years trying to earn their approval, trying to be seen, trying to matter. But he saw it clearly now. He was never going to be their priority. And if that was the case, then maybe it was time to stop seeking their validation altogether. Mark had always known that his parents favored Logan, but knowing it and seeing it unfold in front of him were two different things. Over the years, he had given them the benefit of the doubt, thinking maybe they were just struggling, maybe they needed his help, maybe, just maybe, they weren't actively choosing to drain him dry while Logan lived in blissful ignorance. But the truth had a way of creeping in, sharp and undeniable. It started small, little inconsistencies in conversations, offhand comments that didn't add up. His mother would sigh about how tight money was, yet she and his father never hesitated to cover Logan's latest expenses. Every time Mark sent them financial help, they always needed more, yet their vacations never stopped, Logan's wardrobe never shrank, and their lifestyle remained comfortably untouched. Then, he found the credit card statements. He had stopped by his parents' house one evening to drop off some paperwork they had asked for. They weren't home, but the envelope with his name on it had been left on the kitchen counter. As he picked it up, his eyes drifted to a stack of bills resting beside it. He wasn't the type to snoop, but something about the urgency in their previous conversations about money made his gut twist. He pulled the top sheet closer and skimmed the charges. A sinking feeling settled in his stomach. Thousands of dollars. Dinners at expensive restaurants, five-star hotel stays, first-class airline tickets. The name attached to the account? Logan Carter. Mark inhaled sharply. His grip on the paper tightened. He flipped through the other pages, scanning transaction after transaction. There were payments to Logan's gym, his phone bill, even his credit card debt. And at the bottom of the page, a series of deposits, all in neat, even numbers. Mark Carter, $500. Mark Carter, $1,000. Mark Carter, $2,000. Mark's throat tightened. They weren't struggling. They were funneling his money to fund Logan's life. Every single dollar he had given them, thinking he was helping, had gone straight into his brother's entitled, lazy hands. He heard the front door open and close behind him. Mark, his mother's voice carried through the house, light and casual, completely unaware that, in the last 5 minutes, Mark's entire perception of his family had shattered. He carefully set the papers back in place and turned around, keeping his face neutral. His father followed her into the kitchen, greeting Mark with the same ease as always. They had no idea, no clue that he knew. They made small talk, asked how work was going, if he was eating enough, if he had considered helping Logan find a job. Mark barely listened. His heart was pounding, his hands clenched into fists beneath the table. He wanted to throw the receipts in their faces, to demand to know how they could lie to him over and over again. But he forced himself to stay calm. Exploding wouldn't change anything. They would just find a way to twist it, to turn him into the unreasonable one, the selfish one. No, if they thought they could manipulate him, he would let them keep believing that, for now. Then came the final betrayal. His mother glanced at his father, hesitating slightly before speaking. So, Mark, we've been talking about Logan. Mark exhaled slowly. Of course. His father cleared his throat. He really needs some stability. You've always been the responsible one, and with your business doing well, we figured it would be best for the family if you bought a house. Mark's pulse roared in his ears. For Logan, his mother finished. He almost laughed. Almost. They weren't even asking. They were just assuming. Assuming he would buy Logan a house, just like they had assumed he would send them money, just like they had assumed his success meant he owed them. And the worst part? Logan wasn't even in the room, yet they spoke as if his needs were the only thing that mattered. Mark forced himself to relax his jaw before speaking. And what if I don't? His mother's smile faltered. Don't what? Buy Logan a house, he said evenly. His father's expression darkened. Mark, let's not be difficult about this. No, let's, Mark countered, voice deceptively calm. Let's talk about why I should be the one to buy Logan a house. Let's talk about why he can't do it himself. His mother pursed her lips. You know Logan hasn't had the same opportunities as you. Mark let out a slow breath. You're right. He's had better opportunities. Silence. His father shifted, irritation flashing in his eyes. That's not fair. Mark tilted his head. Isn't it? His mother's voice took on that familiar condescending edge. "Mark, we're family. We take care of each other." Mark smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. "Funny," he said, standing up. "I don't remember anyone taking care of me." His parents stared at him, caught off guard by his sudden movement. "Mark." He held up a hand, cutting his mother off. "I've got to go." His father narrowed his eyes. "We're not done talking about this." Mark met his gaze, steady and unwavering. "Yeah, we are." Without another word, he turned and walked out the door, leaving behind the weight of years of manipulation and guilt. The moment he got in his truck, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. "Logan." "Hey bro, thanks for helping out. I really appreciate it." Mark's grip tightened on the wheel. He hadn't even agreed. They had already told Logan. They had already decided for him. Mark stared at the message, a final realization settling over him. This wasn't about family. This wasn't about fairness. This was about control. And Mark was finally ready to break free. Mark didn't waste time. He didn't argue. He didn't try to convince them of his side. He was done with that. Instead, he silently did the one thing they never expected. He bought the house for himself. No warning. No discussion. No explanations. For the first time in his life, he made a decision without considering what his parents would think, without worrying about their approval, without questioning whether it would inconvenience Logan. It was his house, his money, his life. Signing the paperwork felt surreal. He had spent years grinding just to survive, and now he was holding the keys to something that was his alone. No strings attached, no obligations, no guilt hanging over his head like a storm cloud. Just a simple, undeniable fact. He had done this. The house itself wasn't extravagant. It was a modest, two-bedroom place on the edge of town, with a small front yard and a garage that needed some work. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't flashy, but it was his. And that was enough. For the first time in his life, Mark felt like he could breathe. He took his time settling in, enjoying the quiet, the space, the sheer peace of knowing no one could take this away from him. He furnished it piece by piece, choosing things that felt right, not just whatever was cheapest. He took care of the small repairs himself, fixing a leaky faucet one day, repainting the walls the next. It felt good. It felt right. And then, just as he was starting to enjoy it, they found out. His phone blew up. It started with a call from his mother. He ignored it. Then a text. "Mom, Mark, call me now." A second later, another. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" Then his father. "Dad, we need to talk." Then Logan. "Logan, dude, what the hell?" Mark leaned back on his couch, staring at the flood of messages without an ounce of regret. He knew exactly how this had gone down. The moment the realtor had updated the records, his parents must have checked. Maybe they had been waiting for confirmation, assuming that, any day now, they'd be hearing about how their good son had bought his ungrateful brother a house. Instead, they got a different story. One where Mark had done something for himself, and that, to them, was unacceptable. More calls came in. He didn't answer. More texts. He ignored them. Then came the guilt-tripping. "Mom, Mark, this is selfish. We talked about this. Logan needs this house more than you do. Dad, you already have stability. Logan is struggling. Do you even care about your family? Logan, so you just bought it for yourself? Wow. Guess we know where we stand." Mark chuckled, shaking his head. Unbelievable. They weren't even pretending to be happy for him. Not a single congratulations. Not even a fake attempt at support. It was just outrage, because they had expected something from him that he never agreed to. And that was the problem, wasn't it? They had never asked. They had just assumed. For years, Mark had been the safety net, the one who was always strong enough to handle things. And now, for the first time, he had made a choice that didn't benefit them, and they couldn't stand it. Mark set his phone down and stretched, letting out a deep breath. He didn't owe them an explanation. He had worked for this, earned this. They could throw their tantrums, they could send their guilt-ridden texts, but it wouldn't change a damn thing. Still, he knew they weren't going to stop there. So he got ahead of them. He called his bank and locked down his finances. No more money being sent for emergencies. No more access to his accounts. No more helping when their version of help meant paying Logan's bills. Then, he called a lawyer. Not because he expected legal trouble, but because he knew his family well enough to anticipate their games. He had no doubt they'd try to manipulate, pressure, or even coerce him into giving Logan what they thought he deserved. And finally, he made one public move. A single post. He took a picture of his house, the front porch, the key in his hand, the sun setting behind the roofline. Then, he typed out the caption. Finally home. Worked hard for this, and it's all mine. No explanations. No details. Just a simple truth. The reaction was instant. Most of his friends and coworkers congratulated him, liking and commenting with genuine happiness. But the family chat? Mom, Mark, what is this? Dad, you're embarrassing us. Logan, so you're just gonna rub it in my face? Mark smiled to himself. He could practically hear the chaos on the other end. He could imagine Logan fuming, their parents whispering urgently about what to do next. For the first time in his life, he wasn't playing their game. No justifications. No apologies. Just his life, on his terms. And God, it felt good. Mark knew his parents would be angry, but he hadn't expected this. It was barely noon the next day when he heard the knocking at his door, sharp, insistent, the kind that demanded attention. He knew before even opening it. His parents stood on his porch, his mother's arms crossed, his father's face set in a deep frown. Logan was behind them, sunglasses pushed up into his hair, a look of pure indignation on his face. Mark exhaled through his nose. Here we go. He took his time unlocking the door, stepping out just far enough that they couldn't just barge in. His mother didn't waste a second. Why, Mark? She demanded. Mark raised an eyebrow. Why what? She scoffed, throwing her hands in the air. Don't play dumb. You know exactly what we're talking about. His father's jaw tightened. You bought a house. Mark crossed his arms. Yeah, I did. Silence. As if they were waiting for him to say something else, to add some apology or some excuse that would make it make sense to them. Logan let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. You knew we were counting on that, man. Mark turned to him, expression blank. Counting on what, exactly? Logan blinked, as if he hadn't expected to be questioned. He gestured at the house. We talked about this. Mark's lips curled. No, you talked. You and Mom and Dad. I don't remember ever agreeing to anything. His mother huffed. You didn't have to agree, Mark. We're family. There it was. That word again. The excuse they had always used to make him feel obligated. Mark leaned against the doorframe, arms still crossed. Right. Family. The same family that never asked how I was doing. The same family that didn't care how hard I had to work to get here. He tilted his head. The same family that took my money and gave it to Logan like it was his personal allowance. His mother's eyes widened slightly. Bingo. She knew. His father's expression darkened. We helped you too. Mark let out a dry laugh. Did you? His father's voice hardened. We raised you. Fed you. Put a roof over your head. Mark's stomach twisted, but he forced himself to remain calm. That's called being a parent. That's not helping me. That's your job. Logan scoffed. God, listen to yourself. You sound ungrateful. That did it. Mark let his arms drop, standing up straight, meeting Logan's gaze head-on. Ungrateful. He took a slow step forward. I worked 3 jobs in college while you partied on their dime. I sent them money because they told me they needed it, only to find out they were just funding your lifestyle. He let out a humorless laugh. And now, because I didn't hand you a house on a silver platter, I'm the selfish one? Logan stiffened, glancing at their parents for backup. His mother placed a hand on Mark's arm, her voice softening. Sweetheart, we're just saying, you already have success. You have a career, a business. Logan is still figuring things out. Shouldn't you, as his brother, help him? Mark looked down at her hand, then back up at her face. And then, he said the words that had been boiling inside him for years. No. His mother flinched. His father's lips thinned. Logan's face twisted in disbelief. Mark inhaled deeply. I am not responsible for Logan. I am not his backup plan. I am not his safety net. And I sure as hell am not going to set myself on fire just to keep him warm. Silence. His father's fists clenched at his sides. Mark, think very carefully about what you're saying. Mark didn't even blink. Oh, I have. His mother's voice cracked. If you walk away from this family, we won't be there for you when you need us. Mark smiled. A slow, knowing smile. That's funny, he murmured. Because you were never there for me in the first place. His mother gasped. Logan's face turned red. His father took a slow, measured breath. And then came the final ultimatum. You have 2 choices, his father said, his voice eerily calm. You either do what's right and sign this house over to Logan, or you're cut off. For good. Mark stared at him for a long moment, letting the weight of the words settle. Cut off. Like that was supposed to scare him. like he hadn't already survived without them, like he needed them more than they needed him. Mark slowly tilted his head, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. I'll make it easy for you. He looked each of them in the eyes. I choose me. His father's face darkened with rage. His mother's eyes filled with tears. Logan made a disgusted sound and turned away, shaking his head. Mark didn't wait for another word. He stepped back into his house and shut the door in their faces. His heart pounded, his body thrumming with adrenaline, but he didn't regret it. Not for a second. Because for the first time in his life, he had chosen himself. Mark sat in his living room, the weight of the last conversation still lingering in the air like the remnants of a storm. The echoes of his father's ultimatum, his mother's disappointment, Logan's entitlement. It all simmered just beneath his skin. But as he sat in the silence of his own home, he realized something. He felt free. No more expectations. No more obligations. No more sacrificing himself for a family that had never once prioritized him. For years, they had treated his success as their resource, their backup plan, their solution to Logan's irresponsibility. And for the first time, Mark had drawn the line. And now? Now, he needed to make sure that line stayed drawn. The first thing he did was lock everything down. He sat at his desk, laptop open, going through every financial account, every credit line, every lingering tie his parents might have to his money. He wasn't stupid. He knew how they operated. If they had the ability to leverage anything in his name, they would. He changed passwords, cut off shared accounts, froze his credit, and ensured they had zero access to anything connected to him. Then, he made a call. Hey, Steve? Yeah, I need a security system installed. Full setup, cameras, motion sensors, everything. His parents wouldn't break in, but he didn't trust Logan. Not when he was this entitled, this desperate. When everything was locked down, secured, and accounted for, Mark did one more thing. He made a statement. He pulled up his phone, opened Instagram, and stared at his latest post. The picture of his house, the caption that had sent his family into meltdown. The comments were already exploding, but he wasn't done. He uploaded a new post, a simple one. A picture of him standing in front of the house, keys in hand. No filters, no over-the-top celebration. Just a man who had worked his ass off to get where he was. The caption? Finally home. No handouts. No shortcuts. Just hard work. And he hit post. Within minutes, the reaction was instant. Friends, coworkers, and acquaintances flooded the comments with support. Hell yeah, man. You earned this. Proud of you, bro. No one deserves it more. But then, the other comments started rolling in. His mother commented, Mark, call me. We need to talk. His father didn't comment, but Logan? Logan lost his mind. Wow. So you're just gonna brag about screwing over your own family? That's cold. Mark smirked, but he wasn't going to engage. He had nothing to explain. And then, the messages came flooding in. Logan's texts were pure rage, a mix of insults and self-pity. Logan, you're so selfish. You don't even care about family. Logan, you think this makes you a man? Nah, it makes you a piece of SHD asterisk. Logan, you're just rubbing it in my face. You know I don't have anything, but you don't care. Mark let the texts roll in, not even bothering to reply. He didn't need to. Logan was unraveling all on his own. And then, the real escalation began. His mother started calling his workplace. One of his employees, Dave, walked into the garage with an exasperated look on his face. Dude, your mom just called. Said it was urgent. Mark groaned, wiping the grease from his hands. Did she say what she wanted? Dave shrugged. Something about fixing things before it's too late. I dunno, man, but she sounded serious. Mark sighed. Of course, they wouldn't just accept his decision. He picked up his phone, checked his missed calls, 6 from his mother, 3 from his father, 2 from a random unknown number. He put his phone down. He was done. They had made it clear, his choices didn't matter to them unless they benefited Logan. And if they thought they could manipulate him into guilt, they were in for a rude awakening. Instead of answering, Mark called his lawyer. Hey, Sarah. Quick question. If my parents start harassing me at work, do I have any legal grounds to issue a formal notice? Sarah, always professional and to the point, didn't hesitate. Absolutely. If they continue to interfere with your business, you can send a cease and desist order. If they keep pushing, you can take legal action for harassment. Mark smiled to himself. Good to know. He hung up, feeling lighter than he had in years. The old Mark would have crumbled. He would have felt guilty, questioned himself, wondered if he was really in the wrong. But this version of Mark? He was done being controlled. Instead of responding, instead of engaging, he set his phone on Do Not Disturb, locked up the garage for the night, and drove home. When he got there, he found another surprise waiting for him. An envelope, tucked neatly into his mailbox. No return address. Mark frowned, pulling it out and ripping it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a formal legal notice. His parents were threatening to sue him. The claim? That he had misled them into believing the house was for Logan and had caused emotional distress by denying the family's expectations. Mark stared at the letter for a long moment. Then, he started laughing. They were actually trying to take legal action over a house that he bought with his own money. Unbelievable. But if they thought this was going to shake him, they were dead wrong. Mark walked inside, tossed the letter onto his kitchen counter, and picked up his phone. He called Sarah back. Hey, Sarah. Change of plans. Looks like we're going to need more than a cease and desist. For the first time in his life, Mark wasn't just defending himself. He was fighting back. Mark leaned back in his chair, the legal notice still sitting on his kitchen counter like a joke that wasn't funny. They were actually trying to sue him. Over a house he worked for, a house he paid for, a house that had never been promised to anyone but himself. And the worst part? They weren't even embarrassed by their own audacity. Mark exhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders to release the tension that had been creeping in since the moment he opened that damn envelope. He had expected the guilt trips, the emotional manipulation, the desperate phone calls. But this was a new low. And if they thought they could intimidate him, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. His phone buzzed on the table. Another notification. Mark reached for it, expecting another text from his mother, but instead, his screen was flooded with social media notifications. His stomach twisted. What now? He tapped on the app and immediately saw Logan's latest post. Help Logan get the home he deserves. Mark's eyebrows shot up. You have got to be kidding me. Attached to the post was a GoFundMe link. And then he saw it. The caption. Some of you may have heard about my situation. My brother, who has always had more than me, decided to buy himself a house instead of helping his family. My parents and I have been left struggling while he thrives. If you can find it in your heart to help, I would truly appreciate it. Anything helps. Hashtag Family Matters, hashtag Support Logan. Mark blinked. He read it again. And then he laughed. Loud, sharp, disbelieving laughter. Because this was insanity. Logan had actually gone public with his entitlement. He had painted himself as the victim, as if he hadn't been handed every single opportunity while Mark had worked himself to the bone. He scrolled through the comments, unsurprised by the mix of reactions. Some people were eating it up. So sorry you're going through this, man. Some people just don't understand loyalty. Wow, your brother sounds like a jerk. Family should always come first. Don't worry, Logan. You deserve better. Sending $20 your way. But then there were the others. The ones who saw through the bullshit. Hold up. Wasn't your brother the one who paid for everything while you were out partying? Something isn't adding up. If your parents are struggling, why do they always seem to have money for vacations? Your brother literally built his success from the ground up. You expected a house. That's insane. Mark let out a breath, his pulse steady. This was desperation, plain and simple. Logan was spiraling, and instead of growing up, instead of facing reality, he was trying to crowdfund his entitlement. Mark wasn't going to argue. He wasn't going to engage in a public back and forth, but he was going to make sure the truth was out there. He opened his photo album, scrolling until he found what he needed. Screenshots, receipts, proof. Every text Logan had sent him, every time he had admitted that their parents had planned to pressure Mark into giving up the house. Mark crafted his own post. He kept it simple. Family should take care of each other, right? That's what they told me when they used my money to fund Logan's lifestyle. When they told me my hard work meant I owed him. When they planned to take my house before I even had a chance to live in it. But now that I said no, suddenly, I'm the villain. Funny how that works. Here's the truth. Make your own judgments. Then, he attached the screenshots. And he hit post. It didn't take long. Within minutes, his notifications were blowing up again. The comments turned against Logan, hard. Dude, this makes you look so bad. Yikes. So your brother worked his ass off, and you thought you were entitled to his house? You're not struggling, you're lazy. Imagine being so spoiled that you actually think someone owes you a house. This is embarrassing. And just like that, Logan's GoFundMe crashed and burned. People stopped donating. Others reported the fundraiser as fraudulent. And then, the best part, even their extended family started chiming in. Aunt Linda, I always knew something was off, but this is disgusting. Mark, I'm so sorry you had to go through this. Uncle Ray, Logan, you should be ashamed of yourself. Your brother has always been hardworking. You don't deserve a damn thing from him. The family group chat? Silent. Completely dead. And then, just as expected, his phone rang. Mom. Mark let it ring. Then his father. Then Logan. He ignored them all. He had said what he needed to say. And now? Now they could sit in the mess they created. Because Mark? Mark was finally free. Mark had expected the silence. After dropping the truth bomb, he knew his family would need time to regroup, to strategize. They wouldn't just admit defeat. No, that wasn't their way. They'd lick their wounds, plot their next move, and come back harder. And he was right. 2 days passed. Then 3. His phone stayed eerily quiet. Logan's GoFundMe had been shut down, his attempt to publicly shame Mark had backfired spectacularly, and the family chat had gone completely silent. Until the letter arrived. Mark found it in his mailbox after work, an official-looking envelope with his parents' names listed as the senders. He didn't even need to open it to know what this was. They had actually gone through with it. He stepped inside, tossed his keys onto the kitchen counter, and carefully opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the document, his lips twitching in amusement. They were threatening to sue him. For misleading them into believing the house was for Logan. For causing emotional distress. For failing to meet his familial obligations. Mark laughed. Loud, sharp, utterly disbelieving. This was pathetic. Desperate. And yet, he wasn't surprised. His parents had built their entire world around the idea that Mark existed to be the responsible one, the provider, the fixer. When he stopped playing that role, they didn't know what to do. So they turned to the only weapon they had left, legal intimidation. Too bad for them. Mark had seen this coming. He pulled out his phone and dialed his lawyer, Sarah. Mark, she answered immediately, her tone cool and professional. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Mark smirked. Guess what? They actually sent the lawsuit. A pause. Then Sarah laughed. No way. Are you serious? Dead serious. Mark said, leaning against his kitchen counter. They're claiming I led them to believe I was buying the house for Logan. Sarah snorted. That's not how property law works. The house is in your name, right? Every document, every payment, every single thing is under me. Then this is a joke, she said confidently. They have no case. It's not illegal to not buy someone else a house. Mark let out a slow breath. Good. So what's our move? Sarah hummed in thought. We have 2 options. 1, we ignore it. Let them embarrass themselves in court, if they're even stupid enough to follow through. 2, we send a counter-legal notice, formally warning them that if they continue this harassment, we will pursue legal action against them. Mark didn't even hesitate. Send the warning. Sarah chuckled. I was hoping you'd say that. Mark could almost feel the weight lifting off his shoulders. He wasn't afraid of his family anymore. He wasn't obligated to them. And he sure as hell wasn't going to let them bully him into submission. Consider it done, Sarah said. I'll draft it and send it out by tomorrow. Mark nodded, even though she couldn't see him. Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. No problem. Oh, and Mark. Yeah. You've got nothing to worry about, she said firmly. This is laughable. They're grasping at straws. Mark smiled. Yeah, I know. After hanging up, he set his phone down and exhaled. It was over. He had won. They could rage. They could sulk. They could throw tantrums all they wanted. But legally, they had no power over him anymore. And that knowledge? It felt damn good. The next day, Mark received a text. Not from his parents. Not from Logan. From his father's lawyer. Mr. Carter, I'd like to discuss a potential resolution regarding the current legal matter. Please let me know when you're available to talk. Mark smirked. A resolution? They were already backing down. Instead of replying, he forwarded the message to Sarah. Less than an hour later, she sent back a simple response. They got our letter. They're panicking. Mark chuckled to himself. Good. Let them panic. For years, they had controlled him with fear. Fear of disappointing them. Fear of being labeled the bad son. Fear of being cut off. Now, they were the ones afraid. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, leaned back in his chair, and enjoyed the silence of his home. His home, the one they thought they could take from him. But they never would. Not now. Not ever. Mark sat at his kitchen table, sipping his coffee as his phone buzzed again. Another call from his father. He let it ring. Then another. Decline. Then a text. Dad, pick up the damn phone, Mark. Then another. Dad, let's be reasonable about this. We need to talk. Mark exhaled slowly, staring at the words. Reasonable? They had tried to sue him. They had tried to force him to give Logan the house. They had gaslit, guilt-tripped, and manipulated him for years. And now, after their legal stunt failed, they wanted to talk? Mark wasn't an idiot. He knew exactly what was happening. His parents had assumed he'd roll over. That, like always, he'd cave, that he'd feel so guilty about hurting the family that he'd fix things for them. But this time, there was nothing to fix. He wasn't playing their game anymore. He set his phone down without replying, stretching his legs as he stared out the window. His house sat quiet, peaceful. His space. His success. His life. And they hated that. A sharp knock at the door made him tense. He didn't even need to check. He already knew who it was. Still, he took his time. He set his mug down, adjusted his sleeves, and walked to the door. When he opened it, his father stood on the porch, arms crossed, a look of irritation written all over his face. His mother was beside him, her face drawn, her eyes weary. And behind them, Logan, hands in his pockets, sunglasses perched on his head, his jaw tight. Mark said nothing. He leaned against the doorframe, expression unreadable. His father was the first to speak. Are you really going to ignore your own family? Mark let out a slow, controlled breath. I'm not ignoring you. I'm choosing not to engage. His father's nostrils flared. You're being ridiculous. Mark raised an eyebrow. Ridiculous? You tried to sue me. His mother's lips parted, her voice soft. Mark, that was a misunderstanding. Mark laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. A misunderstanding, he echoed, shaking his head. You sent a legal document claiming I misled you about my own house. His gaze sharpened. What part of that was a misunderstanding? His mother hesitated. We were upset. His father stepped forward, voice tight with frustration. Listen, Mark. We're here to settle this. Like adults. Mark tilted his head. Oh, and what exactly is there to settle? His father exhaled sharply. Logan needs a place to live. You have a house. This doesn't have to be complicated. Mark stared at him. Unbelievable. They weren't here to apologize. They weren't here to admit they were wrong. They were here to negotiate, to make another last-ditch attempt to manipulate him. Logan, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was bitter, sharp. Come on, man. You're really gonna do this? You're really gonna just, what? Act like you don't owe me anything. Mark turned to him, his expression unreadable. I don't owe you a damn thing. Logan's mouth opened, but Mark kept going. You've spent your entire life being handed everything. You were given opportunities one never had. And instead of taking responsibility for yourself, you're standing on my porch, expecting me to fix your problems. His mother stepped in. Mark, please. It's not about fixing problems. It's about family. Mark turned to her slowly. Family. He let the word settle. Family, huh? That's what you call this. His father's patience finally snapped. You're being selfish. Mark nodded. You're right. They all blinked. Mark's voice was calm, unwavering. I am finally being selfish. I am finally choosing myself over a family that only sees me as a resource. He took a step back, gripping the door. And I'm good with that. His father scowled. This is your last chance, Mark. Mark's jaw tightened. Or what? His father straightened. Or we're done. We won't be there for you. We won't help you if you ever need us. Mark exhaled, looking at them. Really looking at them. At his father, whose version of help had always been conditional. At his mother, who had never once stood up for him. At Logan, who had never been told no in his life. And for the first time, Mark felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. No regret. Just relief. He met his father's gaze and smiled. A small, simple, liberated smile. There's nothing to work out. And with that, he shut the door. They didn't knock again. They didn't call. They didn't text. The silence stretched into hours, then days. And Mark? For the first time in his life, he felt free. Mark had expected some sort of retaliation. A last-ditch effort. Some dramatic, desperate play to make him feel guilty, to make him cave. But it never came. Instead, there was only silence. No calls. No texts. No social media rants. It was as if his family had finally accepted that he wasn't coming back. And he was okay with that. More than okay. For the first time in his life, he woke up without tension in his chest, without the weight of obligation pressing down on him. He didn't have to worry about the next guilt trip, the next demand, the next expectation that he was supposed to meet. He was done. And that freedom? It felt damn good. A week later, Mark was at his favorite coffee shop, scrolling through emails on his phone while waiting for his drink. Business was booming at the garage. He had taken on 2 new employees, which meant he could finally take weekends off. He was building something real, something that had nothing to do with his family. Just as he reached for his coffee, he heard it. Logan's voice. Loud. Complaining. Whining. Mark turned his head slightly, spotting Logan at a corner table, hunched over his laptop, talking to some unfortunate friend who had the misfortune of listening to him vent. I mean, can you believe this? He just cut us off. Walked away like we were nothing. Mark sighed and turned back to his coffee. Typical. I tried telling him, man, Logan continued. Tried to make him see reason. But no, he had to be an asshole about it. His friend made a non-committal sound. Logan groaned. And now my parents are losing their minds. They don't know what to do. Dad's saying we might have to sell the vacation house if things don't turn around soon. Mark froze mid-sip. Sell the vacation house. The one they had while claiming they were struggling? The one they had while asking him for money? Mark huffed out a quiet laugh. He shouldn't be surprised. He really shouldn't. But hearing it out loud? That was just confirmation. His family had never been struggling. They just hadn't wanted to sacrifice their own luxury. And when Mark had stopped being their safety net, suddenly, they were feeling the consequences of their own decisions. Good. Logan sighed dramatically. It's just so unfair, you know? I mean, I don't get why I should be punished just because Mark got lucky. Mark clenched his jaw, gripping his coffee cup a little tighter. Lucky. That was what Logan thought. That Mark had just somehow landed on his feet by chance. That all those years of working 3 jobs, scraping by, building his business from the ground up, all of that was just luck. He almost laughed. He could have walked over, could have confronted Logan, could have pointed out every single way in which Logan had been handed everything while Mark had fought for every scrap. But he didn't, because Logan wasn't worth it. Instead, he walked right past him, sipping his coffee as he headed for the door. As he passed, he saw Logan glance up, doing a double take when he recognized him. For a second, Mark thought Logan might say something, might try to start something. But Mark just smiled. A small, knowing smile. And then he walked out, leaving Logan behind. Because that's exactly where Logan belonged. Behind him. That night, as Mark sat in his new house, feet kicked up, the windows open to let the cool air in, he got one last message. From his mother. Mom, Mark. We're still family. Family sticks together. Mark stared at the text for a long moment. Family. The same family that had used him. That had treated him like an investment instead of a son. The same family that had only cared about him when he was useful. And now? Now that he was choosing himself? Now, suddenly, they wanted to play the family card. Mark exhaled, shaking his head. He didn't even feel angry anymore. He felt done. And it was the most peaceful feeling in the world. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Instead, he locked his phone, leaned back, and closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel guilty. He just felt free. The final text from his mother sat on Mark's phone, unanswered, like a ghost of the past. Family sticks together. For years, he had believed that. He had lived by that. Every sacrifice, every choice, every decision he had made had been for the sake of a family that had never once done the same for him. But now he saw the truth. Family wasn't about obligation. It wasn't about duty. It wasn't about who could be used, controlled, or manipulated the most. Family was about mutual respect. And if they couldn't give him that, then he had no reason to keep giving them chances. Mark turned off his phone and placed it on the table. He didn't even feel the urge to reply. He didn't feel guilt. He didn't feel loss. He felt relief. A few weeks passed. Life moved on. His garage was thriving. He hired another employee, freeing up more of his time. He reinvested in the business, upgraded equipment, and started getting more high-end clients. And his house. It finally started feeling like home. There were no sudden phone calls demanding money. No texts guilt-tripping him into funding someone else's life. For the first time, Mark was living for himself. And it was so much better than he ever imagined. One afternoon, he was finishing up a job when Dave, one of his mechanics, poked his head into the office. Mark? You got a visitor." Mark wiped his hands on a rag and glanced up. "Who is it?" Dave hesitated. "Your brother." Mark stilled. It had been weeks since their last encounter. He had half expected Logan to throw another tantrum online, to try and rally their extended family against him. But instead, Logan had gone silent. And now he was here? Mark sighed, setting the rag down. "Where is he?" "Outside. By the lot," Dave said. "Want me to tell him to leave?" Mark considered it. Really considered it. But something in him said no. "Let's see what he wants." "Thanks, Dave. I'll handle it." Mark stepped outside, the afternoon sun warm against his skin. Logan was leaning against his car, arms crossed, but he looked different, less arrogant, less entitled. For the first time in a long time, Logan actually looked uncertain. Mark walked up, keeping his tone neutral. "What do you want, Logan?" Logan let out a slow breath. I don't know, man. I figured I'd try talking to you one last time." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Talking? Or guilt-tripping?" Logan flinched, but didn't argue. Mark exhaled, crossing his arms. "All right. Say whatever you came here to say." Logan hesitated, then ran a hand through his hair. "I messed up." Mark blinked. "That was unexpected." Logan let out a humorless chuckle. "I really thought I had it all figured out, you know? Mom and Dad always told me I had potential, that things would work out, that someone would take care of it. And then you walked away." He swallowed. "And I realized no one was coming to save me." Mark studied him carefully. Was this real? Or just another performance? "So," Mark said, "what do you want from me?" Logan sighed. "Nothing. I mean, I did. Before. But now." He shook his head. "I just wanted to say I get it. Why you left. Why you finally said no." He hesitated, then looked down. "I wish I'd figured it out sooner." Mark didn't know how to respond to that. Logan sighed again. "I got a job." That actually made Mark's eyebrows lift. "A real job." Logan smirked slightly. "Yeah, real job. Pays like crap, but I'm doing it. First paycheck comes in next week." Mark nodded slowly. Interesting. For the first time in his life, Logan was actually standing on his own. And it had only happened because Mark had finally walked away. Silence stretched between them. Logan shifted, looking awkward. "Anyway, I just wanted to say that. You don't have to care. Just figured I owed you at least that much." Mark studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good luck, Logan." Logan nodded back. "Yeah, you too." Then, without another word, he got in his car and drove off. Mark stood there, watching him go, waiting for that familiar pull, the part of him that had always felt responsible for Logan, the part that wanted to fix things, smooth things over, make it right. But it never came. Instead, he just felt peaceful. Logan had his own path now. And Mark? Mark was finally free. That night, Mark got one last text from his mother. "Mom, your father and I are disappointed in you, Mark. But we hope one day you'll come to your senses and come back to your family." Mark stared at the message, feeling nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just certainty. He deleted the message. Then, he blocked the number. For years, he had been the overlooked son, the one who sacrificed, the one who was expected to give, while getting nothing in return. But not anymore. Because Mark finally understood something. His success was his own. His future was his own. And his life? His. He wasn't the overlooked son anymore. He was his own person. And that was more than enough.